Let's bring in former Chief of Staff to Marco Rubio's presidential campaign, Matt Terrill, back with us. Matt, good to see you again. And I just want to talk about that a little bit. Charlie Kirk, the husband and father, and we can't forget that this was a man, a dad, a husband, just murdered for nothing more than having opinions, strongly expressed opinions, but just opinions. We've said this so much over the last 24 hours, but what does it say about where we are, Matt?
Yeah, it's horrific. It's sad. And this is a human being. This was a father. This was a husband. Is a man of faith. And I think what it says about where we're at is we are at a very disturbing moment in our country. And, you know, we are no longer in a place right now where people are deciding to handle things through peace. We're seeing people take actions like we saw in this assassination against Charlie Kirk. And the bigger concern I have is that you have leaders, in some cases members of Congress, for example, who are using language that I'm very concerned about. You know, when we go out and call President Trump a fascist, when you have people going out and saying other things, that only, in my view, incites potential violence, or in some cases, actual violence. And so this is not to blame, but this is to say, what can we do better? And I think a big part of this is leaders coming together. I think a big part of this is making sure that we recognize that this is a defining moment. There are two paths this country can go down right now. One path is a path toward unity and peace and moving forward in that direction, or it's another path that'll be destruction and may very well lead to another situation like a Charlie Kirk assassination. Hopefully not. But that's the danger we are at right now. And, you know, this is something that's been building for quite some time. We saw this happen on the campaign trail with President Trump having an assassination attempt against him. We've seen it in other ways as well, and we're seeing it not just against political leaders, but places like North Carolina, where a young girl was on a train just heading home and was stabbed to death. So this is something that I think Americans recognize is not just targeted towards political leaders, but if it can happen in North Carolina, a train to a young woman, I think many Americans are concerned that they are all potential victims. And that's why I think many Americans have been rallying behind President Trump and his efforts to fight crime, his efforts to try and restore safety in places like Washington, D.C. So this is really a very important time for our nation. I think it's going to be a very defining time for our nation, no question about it.
And Matt, you talk about the onus that is on leaders here. And when we talk about leaders, we obviously think immediately of presidents, senators, members of Congress. But it also strikes me that in this world of, as Julian was holding up, cell phones, etc., we have a lot of different leaders, at least in terms of thought these days. The podcast leaders, the Reddit, Substack leaders who all lead thought as well. And that makes it much harder for somebody just like a president to lead the country because people are looking in different directions a lot these days.
No question about it. You know, you have these new platforms that have risen, and in some cases we're not sure what's accurate or not in some of these platforms. And the other part of this is growing distrust. You've seen for quite some time Americans having growing distrust in the institutions that they are told throughout their entire lifetimes to have trust in. And you've seen that across the board. And so you've seen Americans gravitate towards other platforms. In some cases it's podcasts, other platforms, and there are many people with podcasts who do a fantastic job. There are others who certainly don't in terms of getting accurate information out there and educating the public and having a dialogue in a peaceful way. But look, it also comes down to people having trust in one another and having trust in institutions. You're seeing, for example, you know, we talk about leaders. You know, you're right. It's not just presidents. It's not governors or members of Congress, but it's also leaders of institutions. You know, we're seeing growing distrust, for example, in many data points around healthcare in our country, particularly on the heels of the COVID pandemic. People having growing distrust in healthcare leaders. So I think it's incumbent on leaders, to your point, whether it's in the private sector, the public sector, or in the media sphere, in the podcast sphere, to do their part, to unite the country, to do their part, to get accurate information out there, and to do their part to make sure that we are championing language that's going to unite this country. And again, that's not to put, restrictions on what people can say. You know, I am all for freedom of speech, but I'm also for recognizing when you have members of Congress, or in one case it was Vice President Harris going out and calling President Trump a fascist. That's, in my view, a problem. And I don't mean to keep bringing up that same example, but it's a core example of where we're at right now. But it is incumbent on both sides of the political aisle to unite, to come together, and do their part to make sure that there is positive rhetoric that will lead to a record of success of this country, having unity, and hopefully not having a situation with the Charlie Kirk assassination ever happen again.
Matt Terrill. Matt, it has been such a pleasure talking to you over the last couple of nights in these extraordinarily difficult circumstances for the country. A real honor to have been with you. Thank you so much, Matt.
Thank you.